Hi there and welcome to my channel. My name is Chris Ray and I'm a technology consultant. Today I'm going to follow on from the last video where I talked about business systems and talk today about personal productivity systems. So why is a productivity system important? Well, probably everybody wants to get more done, but I think what's more important than that is everybody wants to get more of the right things done. And so when we talk about the 80-20 rule, that 20% that we'd really like to do more of to achieve some of our personal, business, family goals, and those things that really will take us a step forward in terms of where we want to be. I'm going to just give you an overview of a simple productivity framework. The reason I call it a framework is because it essentially gives you that frame with which to hang all of the individual tools and processes that fit you. And that's a really important point, is not everybody's system is the same, and I don't expect you to take away my system and apply it to yourself. But it does give you an idea of someone else's system, something that works for me, something that I've changed over the last few years, and something that now really works for me in terms of I need to spend less time thinking about the system and I can just get on with doing the doing. So let's start with looking at email. And email is probably the bane of most people's lives. And the very fact that you send email means that you will get more email back again. But it probably is one of the first things that people pick up when they start their work day in terms of looking through what has arrived overnight. And really, there are only a few things to do with email. If the action is going to take less than 2 minutes, just do it. If the email contains something that needs to be actioned, then turn it into a task and archive the email, or take the contents of the email and put them into a task. And then the last one is archive it. So if it's for your information, if it's part of a project, it is something you may need to rely on later, just click that archive button that actually most people don't know what does, and it will put it into your saved emails. There's always another option, and that is just simply delete it. So the trick is not to use your email as a means of tracking your tasks or tracking your projects. It's simply a means of communication and should just be used for that. The second piece here within the framework is your task manager. And by this I mean individual tasks. I don't mean projects. I don't mean some of the bigger work that perhaps is collaborative within your team. I'm thinking here about individual tasks that you know when they're completed. So there's probably a number of tasks that you want to keep in here. One is the recurring tasks. Go to the gym every Tuesday night. People always talk about flossing and wanting to floss more as a recurring task, so put it in as a daily task. But there are also individual tasks from projects, there are tasks from your personal life, there are tasks from friends, there are things you need to do. There is no end to the number of tasks you will have in your list. And this is also another really important point, is that there will always be more tasks than you have time to do them. Always, always. And I'll talk about calendaring next and about fitting them in. One of the items that always comes up is, should I mix my personal tasks and my work tasks together in the same system? And I think really, again, it depends on your individual system and how you work, whether you work for yourself, whether you work for another company, how many clients you have, and so on. For me, I keep my client work separate. So I use Asana for that system because it's primarily built up of projects. And so I keep that very separate than my personal work. My personal tasks, my recurring tasks, things that contribute towards my goals for the week, month or year, I use on my personal task management system. I use Todoist. Again, I'm not going to get hung up about the system, but I keep them separate. Sometimes there's always going to be a little bit of an overlap, but generally I would suggest that you keep them separate. And so that brings us on to the calendar. And really this is the area that we should be focusing on throughout our day. It tells us where we need to be, what we need to be doing, whether we have meetings, whether there is something important that needs to be attended to at a specific time. So I always generally keep an eye on my calendar. I don't necessarily keep it open, but I do check it throughout the day, and I only have notifications from my calendar. I turn notifications off for everything else, but my calendar is the only one that I need to be notified. So I don't want to miss a meeting, I don't want to miss a call. One of the important things about the calendar, and we as humans, is we're not very good at estimating how long a task will take. And so really the calendar is there for us to use as a tool to take all of the meetings we need to go to, all of the places that we need to be on that particular day, putting in the big rocks, the most important things first, and then adding in the other slightly less of a priority tasks into some of the gaps within them. Now, people talk about time blocking, so essentially blocking out chunks of time to do specific tasks. I've always tried to keep away from time blocking, not that there's anything wrong with the system itself, but I didn't really want a piece of software telling me what I should and should not be doing at a specific time of day. I've slightly changed my opinion to fit around my own working style. There are morning people, there are evening people, there are people who have energy levels that fluctuate. We should not ignore that. And so for me, I've split my time into mornings. When I get some of my personal tasks done, I tend to work on my business during that period. Then there is a lunchtime activity. Normally I'll try and do some exercise and go swimming. And then there's the afternoon activities where I generally will spend concentrating on client face-to-face meetings, client-specific tasks, and work that involves a bit of deep thought, and I just need a bit of peace and quiet within that period to do those tasks. It's all about getting things done. In the evenings, I think as most people, we don't want to work forever. I tend to spend more of my time doing casual stuff, personal stuff, enjoying myself, watching movies, reading and all of that lovely stuff with friends. But also, I'm very aware that because of the time zone that I work in, I may have to do client work in some of those periods as well. So again, it's all about fitting it in. And I'm not sure I could call it blocking because I don't specifically block, but I do allocate certain pieces of time, and it varies throughout the week in terms of this particular chunk of time is for doing this particular type of work. And I don't say that my system is perfect, but when I look at my task manager in using that with my calendar, those tasks that I need to get done that day will now feature in my calendar. So I know that everything will get done during that day. So again, I can't stress enough how important the calendar is in terms of capturing everything that you need to do within that day. So having this simplified view of the day means that I can just concentrate on getting things done. I don't have to worry about the system. I don't have to worry about what I'm doing over what time of day. I don't need to keep checking. I just know that following this system of allocating pieces of work to a specific time of day just means that I can just follow the process and things get done. The fourth piece of this framework is for capturing what I would call notes. There are pieces of paper that we pick up throughout the day. There are notes and information that we will gather. We will capture potentially receipts and chunks of information and browse the web for interesting items we want to read later. And there is a whole mass of information that we generally collect and use that we may want to store and keep, potentially read later. Now I'm going to refer to these as notes, but they could be receipts, they could be material for projects, they could be plans, they could be a whole host of items that we may want to collect that information and store it and or use it later. Now, I won't go into systems. There is just about everything. I use Evernote, but I've also seen, use of OneNote, Notion, Apple Notes, and so on. The systems are endless. And again, it doesn't really matter which piece of software that you use, but have somewhere to store your notes. The last piece of this framework is what I would call files. So people will send us stuff. We will create files. If I'm going to a meeting, I might take a presentation. There's a file with that. The downloads folder, attachments to email. There are always things for files, and this is probably one that took me the longest to resolve, but there needs to be a place for everything, and the file structure needs to be totally clear. So I split my file storage into just two areas. The first one is my personal life, and the second one is my business. And even though I may have multiple roles and multiple clients within that business, those will have individual folders of their own. They will all sit in the business section. I always used to have the problem of, Chris, can you just send me a copy of that file? And I would go hunting about. It might be in my downloads folder, I might put it in the client folder, I may have put it in the business folder, I may have put it in the templates folder. I just simply couldn't find anything. So I did spend some time reordering my files and folder structure. Again, keeping it as simple as possible to be able to categorize and find specific files. And it works for me now. It took a little bit of adjustment, but I now have a structure whereby I only have two folders within the root folder, one for personal and one for business. And it's reasonably obvious when you go into those subfolders where files are. And then the trick is to collect those files that may end up in your downloads folder at the end of the day or the end of the week and put them where they belong. A place for everything and everything in its place. Now, I should also mention backups, because if you're storing all of these files locally, and heaven forbid should anything happen to your computer, you need to think about what's going to happen to those files. So are they stored in a backup? Do you have cloud storage? Are there copies everywhere? I used to store my files in Apple iCloud, but that's not really a backup system, it's a storage system. So I do also keep a backup copy of all of my files, just in case. I tend to use cloud storage for keeping the files that I'm currently working on, because I tend to work on more than one computer and I do want to share things. But just ensure you have a good structure, but you also have a backup of that. That's an overview of the framework. It is a framework. It should be specific to you. It should work for you. Now, I've mentioned lots of software related tools, but sometimes people do prefer physical writing, physical books, journals, notebooks. There is no wrong in this system as long as you can fit it within that framework. And the most important thing here is you'll notice that there is no overlap within this framework. So my task manager is just for tasks. My calendar is just for events. Email is not a task manager. Do not store tasks in your email. Do not store all of those emails. You want to keep your email empty, action it, turn it into a task. Email is not a task manager. So throughout this framework, keep everything separate. I know there are tools that attempt to do more than one of these things. So Microsoft Outlook also has a task manager as well as tracking email, and that might be fine if you're using the task manager and the email within Outlook, but don't create another task manager. Keep them single-use tools, so there's no overlap. Because if you overlap everything, you're generally going to find either you have to enter things twice, or you go looking for something and you can't find it, or worse than that, you forget where those items are stored and you forget the event or the task. So that's it. That is the productivity framework. I've been honing this framework for a number of years. I still try out new tools. I still try out new ways of working to try and improve on this. But this framework works for me, and I've also given this framework to other people and they also find it useful. So I hope that was useful. If you found this video of use, there will be some more. If you just click on subscribe, click the bell, comment, and if I missed something, then please add a comment below. And I'll see you in the next video.